The jungle wasn't quiet. It was listening. Every rustle of the leaves felt like a breath against the back of your neck, and every breath could be your last. Private First Class Daniel Hayes crouched low in the tall grass, the sweat running down his face, stinging his eyes. The M16 in his hands felt heavier than it had that morning, and his ears strained to separate the hum of insects from the faint, almost ghostly sound of distant movement. It was day 42 in the field. The platoon had been pushing deeper into the Pubai region, where the jungle canopy choked out the sun and made every shadow look like an enemy waiting to strike. Supplies were low, tempers were shorter, and the air was thick enough to feel like it was pressing in on your lungs. Sergeant Collins moved up beside Hayes, his face painted in streaks of green and black. His whisper was almost a growl. "Keep your eyes up, Hayes. They've been tracking us since dawn." Hayes nodded, though his heart was already pounding hard enough to drown out the cicadas. Behind them, the rest of Alpha Squad advanced in a slow, crouched line. 8 men, each burdened not just with gear, but with the invisible weight of 42 days of fear. By midday, the heat was suffocating. They reached a small clearing, a rare opening in the sea of green. Collins raised a fist, signaling a halt. Hayes dropped to one knee, scanning the tree line. That's when he saw it. A glint, not sunlight on a leaf, not the reflection of water, it was steel. Before he could call out, the crack of a rifle tore through the air. Corporal Russo, 2 men down the line, jerked violently and collapsed face first into the dirt. "Incoming!" Collins barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. The squad hit the ground as the jungle erupted, bullets snapping past, leaves exploding into green confetti. The sound was deafening, an orchestra of death conducted by an unseen hand. Hayes's training kicked in. He pressed his cheek to the rifle's stock and returned fire, aiming at the flashes between the trees. He could barely see them, just brief silhouettes that vanished as quickly as they appeared. It lasted maybe 30 seconds. Then, silence. Not the natural silence of the jungle, but that strange, unnatural stillness that follows violence. Collins signaled 2 men forward. They moved cautiously into the tree line, rifles raised. Moments later, a shout came back. "Clear!" But it wasn't clear. Russo was dead, and the enemy had vanished without leaving so much as a footprint. They buried Russo there in the clearing, marking the grave with a crude wooden cross. No speeches, no prayers, just the sound of the shovel cutting into the earth and the occasional call of a distant bird. Hayes stared at the cross long after the others moved on. In his mind, Russo's laugh still echoed, that deep belly laugh he'd used to lighten the mood on long marches. Now it was gone. Night fell like a trap. The jungle was a black wall around their small camp, and the air seemed to hum with an energy that set Hayes's nerves on edge. They posted watches in pairs. Hayes drew the second shift with Private Morales, a 19-year-old from New Mexico, who still carried a photo of his high school sweetheart in his breast pocket. They sat in silence, eyes scanning the darkness. "You think we'll make it back?" Morales asked suddenly, his voice barely more than a whisper. Hayes didn't answer right away. "We'll make it back," he said finally, "but we won't be the same." Before Morales could reply, there it was again, that faint, deliberate movement just beyond the perimeter. Hayes raised his rifle, Morales following suit. The sound stopped. The night went still. Then, a voice. Low. In Vietnamese. Hayes's blood turned to ice. They woke Collins, who gathered the men and ordered a silent repositioning. But as they shifted deeper into the jungle, Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that they were being funneled, herded into some unseen kill zone. Hours later, with dawn still a promise on the horizon, they found themselves at the edge of a river. The water was slow-moving, its surface shrouded in mist. Collins called for a halt, scanning the banks. That's when they heard it, a faint, rhythmic splash. Someone or something was crossing upstream. The squad froze. The jungle held its breath. Hayes gripped his rifle tighter, eyes locked on the shadows in the fog. And then, through the mist, figures began to emerge. The figures in the mist moved with slow, deliberate steps, their shapes warped by the fog. Hayes counted at least 5, maybe 6, each one carrying something long and dark across their shoulders. Rifles. Collins motioned for the squad to get low, his hand slicing through the air like a knife. The men melted into the foliage at the riverbank, rifles aimed but fingers still off the triggers. The splashing stopped. For a long moment, the only sound was the faint trickle of water downstream. Hayes's breathing slowed, his finger tightening on the trigger. And then one of the figures called out, sharp, loud, in Vietnamese. The jungle answered with silence. A single shot cracked through the mist. Private Morales staggered back, clutching his shoulder, blood spilling between his fingers. Chaos erupted, shouts in 2 languages, gunfire from both sides, the hiss of rounds whipping past Hayes's ears. Hayes fired into the fog, aiming for muzzle flashes, barely registering the recoil. The squad returned fire, the jungle exploding with the sounds of war. Collins barked orders, pulling the squad into a tighter formation while dragging Morales behind cover. Minutes blurred into seconds, seconds into nothing. When the shooting stopped, the river was empty again. Only the drifting mist remained, curling over the surface like the smoke of an extinguished fire. But 2 of their own were down. Morales was alive, barely, his face pale under the smear of blood. Private Jensen lay still, his helmet tilted at an unnatural angle. "We can't carry 2 casualties and make it back," Collins said grimly, his voice low so only Hayes could hear. "We patch Morales up as best we can. We move light and we move fast." Hayes hated it, but he understood. Out here, every extra pound could kill you. The march back began with a tension so thick it was almost tangible. They moved in silence, eyes darting from shadow to shadow. The jungle felt tighter, as if the trees themselves were closing in. By midday, the heat became suffocating again, sweat pooling under their gear. Hayes's mind kept replaying the moment at the river, the flash of movement, Morales falling, Jensen's helmet hitting the ground. "Eyes up, Hayes," Collins said without looking back. "They're not done with us yet." They reached a narrow ridge overlooking a valley, the green expanse below hiding who knew how many enemy fighters. As they began the descent, a sudden burst of automatic fire tore into the hillside. Dirt and leaves erupted around them. "Contact! Left flank!" someone shouted. The squad dove for cover, returning fire. Hayes rolled behind a fallen log, his M16 barking in 3-round bursts. Collins moved along the line, shouting orders, his voice cutting through the chaos. A grenade exploded nearby, the shockwave slamming Hayes against the log. His ears rang, his vision swimming. Through the haze, he saw a shadow break from the tree line, an enemy soldier rushing toward their position. Hayes didn't think. He fired once, twice. The shadow crumpled, sliding down the slope into the undergrowth. The firefight stretched on, the enemy pressing hard from multiple angles. Then, over the din of gunfire, Hayes heard it, a deep, rumbling thunder from above. Helicopters. 2 UH-1 Hueys broke through the canopy, their rotors chopping the humid air. The door gunners opened up with M60s, stitching the tree line with fire. The enemy faltered, their attack breaking apart under the combined force of the squad's rifles and the Huey's guns. Collins grabbed the radio, calling in their position. Minutes later, the Hueys touched down in a patch of flattened grass. The squad dragged Morales aboard, followed by the rest of the survivors. From the open door of the helicopter, Hayes watched the jungle recede beneath them. The river wound like a dark scar through the green, its mist already closing back over the water. Collins sat across from him, helmet in his lap, eyes fixed on nothing. No one spoke. The only sound was the roar of the rotors and the faint ringing still in Hayes's ears. Back at base, Morales was rushed to the field hospital. Jensen's body was wrapped in a poncho and placed with the others waiting for transport home. Hayes sat on the edge of his bunk that night, staring at the damp, mud-streaked boots on the floor. His hands still smelled faintly of gunpowder. The jungle was behind them now, but it hadn't let them go. It never would. He thought of Russo, of Jensen, of the faces of men who would never walk out of that green hell. And he knew that somewhere out there, In the endless tangle of trees and shadows, the war was still listening. The jungle never gave back what it took. Men went in with their rifles, their packs, and their hope. Some came out with medals, some came out with scars, and some never came out at all. For Hayes, the war wasn't something he could leave behind in Vietnam. It had followed him, a ghost in the corner of every room, a shadow at the edge of every dream. And in that shadow he could still hear it, the sound of water moving in the mist, and footsteps that never quite stopped.